So, welcome to the Crowd Science Seminar Series. In the seminars, we will cover a broad area of human-AI collaboration to allow discussing past and future work, exchanging ideas, and establishing new collaborations. In the very first instance of the Crowd Science Seminar, I'm excited to present Pavel Braslavki, a researcher from the Ural Federal University and the Higher School of Economics, Russia. He studies information retrieval and is known for his foundational work for information retrieval evaluation, especially for the Russian language. Today, he will tell us about evaluation of humor using crowdsourcing. So let's start.
Okay, Dima, thank you very much for introduction. And thank you very much for inviting me for this inaugural workshop, inaugural meetup, and thank you for coming. So today I will make a short presentation about, just a moment, just a moment, a technical problem. Okay. I will talk about humor evaluation using crowdsourcing. Dima introduced me already. As he said, I have two affiliations now, Ural Federal University and Higher School of Economics in Moscow. And I have also industrial experience at Yandex and SKB Contour. And my recent research interests are question answering, literary fiction analysis using computers, and computational humor. And here's a link to my homepage. If you're interested in my publication, you can find everything there. So I will talk about research that we conducted with my co-authors in 2017 and 2018. Here are my colleagues, Vlad Blinov, Valeria Bolotova, Kirill Mishchenko, and Katya Bertsova. And actually, my today presentation will be basically based on our work published in CHEER 2018, but I will also refer to our earlier work that actually led to this experiment. A couple of words about humor. Here's the definition of humor from Wikipedia, and the most important thing is that we can hardly imagine human communication between humans without humor. And in this sense, every human has a sense of humor to a certain extent, to a larger, to a greater or lesser extent. So, and if we want to make a conversation with computers more natural, more enjoyable, and so on, we have to implement some humor functions in our personal assistants, intelligent assistants. Here's another quote from last year's Alexa Prize. And Rohit Prasad said that it's a very important point that humor is coming to these personal assistants in this competition is very important, very cool, and at the same time very, very hard to implement good humor. The epigraph from today's talk would be this quote from Robert Heinlein, "Monse is a hard mistress." If you can, maybe you can remember that the computer Mike is becoming more intelligent, and the main characters notes that this point is marked by the fact that Mike, the computer, starts to understand humor, and he asked the computer to evaluate some jokes, and he sees that computer is gradually progressing, he's improving, and he's a very good sign that the computer is becoming more intelligent. So I think humor in the human-computer interaction is a good sign of the level of intelligence of the machine intelligence. So, okay, this maybe the most important slide, why we wanted to evaluate humor, why we wanted to conduct these experiments. The first bullet I already said, why personal assistants should possess some sense of humor. But it is important that when at the time we began the experiments, we played with with Apple Siri, and it's I don't know how it's now, but at that time it could be easily, you could easily find that Siri responded with this very same joke to the same utterance, and the variations of joke was very low, and it was so you could imagine that these jokes are handwritten and hard-coded to respond with this joke to this utterance, and it's what the variability was very low. And when we proceed to humor generation, we need to, if it's automatically generated, we need to be able to evaluate this humor generation. And we encountered this problem when worked on this IR-based human generation, and I will talk about this in a minute. And when we thought how could we evaluate humor, everybody said humor is too subjective. You cannot get reliable scores, reliable evaluation, reliable judgments. So it's very hard, if not impossible. And the second, so we wanted to try it, and the second concern was we don't have a ground truth label. How can we control the task? How can we assess the task? How the assessor, how the Turkers are going? And it was the second problem. We were not that sure that we can control the crowd. So, and another consideration was if the scores, the judgments are not that, if the workers agree, can we possibly explain this disagreement with some demographics, for example, and for some context, by some context? So these are these two, the two bullets are our quasi-research questions, and a couple of words of the previous study that led us. It was in 2016, 2017, and the idea was to generate a humor response from scratch is very hard. Let's try to just pick up the most suitable, most appropriate joke from a large collection and see if it works or not. And we collected quite a large collection of presumably funny tweets, about 300,000. And we implemented three very simple baseline IR models like BM25 and some variations, and Doc2Vec neural model. And then we naturally wanted to evaluate the output. And we came up with two settings. First is community question answering. We tried to use already the crowd, but in a peculiar way, and in lab settings. So here, how we use the crowd, we just we have this jokes and riddles category in Yahoo Answers, And we took the question and we generated an answer using 3 models, and we took the best, the top 1 results, and just posted to the community question answering. For example, here can be one of the. It's not our response, but we just responded with the output of a model. And we collected thumb up and thumb down and best answers, and we collected some evidence what is the better model. We evaluated the models on almost 100 questions. And the second approach was a lab setting. We just implemented such an posted a question and different answers, and the assessor would assess the answers using 4 grade scale. And here are some examples. Here the average score over 3 assessors, and but the problem was to evaluation didn't allow us what the best. And according to one approach, one model was better. According to another approach, another was better. So we realized that this is a serious problem, and we wanted to conduct a more focused experiment. And this experiment is described in our CHEER paper, 2018 paper. You can again find it at my homepage or elsewhere. And what follows is actually some highlights from this paper. The study design. As I said, we are not sure that we can hire crowd workers to assess humor. So we tried to hire both crowd workers and volunteers. And the volunteer, we advertised the task on social networks, and we had slightly more volunteers than Turkers, but and in some it was almost 300 people. We collected also some demographics. We collected age, rank, gender, English proficiency, and we also asked 2 humor-related questions. So the first question was related to humor perception, and the second was related to humor generation. The first was, I laugh often, it's easy to make me laugh. And the second question was, I usually pun, tell jokes, funny anecdotes in a social situation. We also, the participants also answered the Big 5 questionnaire. And unfortunately, we forgot to ask about education. It was our fault, and we regret it, but this demographics parameter is missing. So the Big 5 is you probably know, it's a very popular personality trait characteristics. And in fact, you get, after completing the questionnaire, you get the five values, each corresponding to one dimension, like neuroticism, openness, extroversion, and so on. And what is more important, we found a version that is much shorter than the original questionnaire, and it's more suited for online setting. And our second, why we did it, because we found a meta review that I put the reference here that the conclusion was that big five personality traits are connected to the humor perception style. And we thought that we can explain some variability in humor scores through these big five personality traits. But we felt we couldn't find any correlations. So we have this data, but we couldn't interpret them. So, but we collected 30 drugs from different sources. The list can be found under this URL. And here are some examples. Here, the breakdown of this small collection of drugs by source. Of course, each source is represented with only few jokes, and it's not representative, but we wanted to maintain this diversity, and we collected from different sources. Here are some examples. Am I the coolest person in the world, and how did the hipster burn his mouth? And we collected Siri jokes from, there are many collections of Siri jokes online. We have also make use of this interesting data set. It's actually for recommender systems, for online recommender systems, and it contains not many jokes, about 150 when I remember correctly, but many ratings of these few jokes. And we just took these jokes, and the study was performed in the late 90s, so it's kind of outdated. And we also collected jokes from Reddit, Twitter, and we also took these dialect jokes from our previous study, just to compare to them what we get in our previous experiment. And this is the interface is very similar to what we had before, but in this case we have 3 jokes on a page, 10 pages in total. And here are no variants. Here's a dialect joke. And in the previous study, we have stimulus, and we had 3 responses to this stimulus. Here we have three dialect jokes on a page, and we have 4-grade scale. It's from not funny to hilarious. It's from 1 to 4. Here are results. Again, it's these 7 or 5 jokes are not quite representative for the whole collection, but you can see that we sampled them randomly, and you can see that, for example, Reddit jokes are the funniest ones, and gesture jokes are funny too, and for example, Siri jokes are not that funny. Yeah, answers also. Here are our jokes from our 5 jokes from our previous study, compiled automatically. And it's also interesting that for some sources we have initial rating. For example, in Jester we have many joke ratings. We could rank these 7 jokes according to these scores and compare the ranking. Of course, it's a tiny sample, but you can see that in some cases, Spearman correlation coefficient is even negative. So the ranking of funny tweets is quite. It's not doesn't correlate with what we could expect based on likes and retweets. This is almost perfect, but again, these are ranking that this ranking we obtained based on our previous study, and it's very in lab setting. It's very, very similar. So it's not a surprise that the correlation is that high. But in case of Reddit, it's quite good, and in gesture is okay. So it's the interesting conclusion that you can hardly reuse joke ratings, joke evaluation and when they were obtained in different setting or in different time. So the main results are in this table. Most interesting observations. So joke ratings, average joke ratings decrease with age. It's actually, this is only the one, it's an outlier, but you can see that joke ratings decrease in volunteers and Turkers. Actually, this is it's known from psychological literature that humor ability is decreasing. There are some hypotheses why it's so. One of the hypotheses that cognitive abilities decrease with age, and so do the humor perception ability. So it's a hint for young people. Make fun now. Maybe it won't be so funny in older age. So, but what was also interesting in case of male and female participants, the average ratings were almost identical, and there is no much difference in how male and female participant rated the jokes. What was a bit and what was also important that Turkers and volunteers, they rated jokes not exactly this in the same way, but joke ranking was the same based on Turkers scores and volunteer scores. And what was unexpected and quite interesting, that language proficiency influenced the joke ratings in an unexpected way. You can see that the better, the higher the language proficiencies. For example, here are native speakers. Maybe here's more. Native speakers tend to rate jokes lower, and the lower the language proficiency is, the higher the average joke score. It was quite a surprise because we found in the literature that language proficiency is very important for humor perception, for humor understanding, and it sounds quite logical to be able to understand joke, especially a pun joke with a wordplay. You have to have a good command of English. But we try, so our hypothesis is that in our setting, the participants they knew that they were assessing jokes. It must be funny, more or less. And people who had a lower English proficiency, and when in case they understood the joke, they were so happy and they rated the jokes higher because they understood the wordplay and the pun. And this is possible explanation of this counter this unexpected behavior. Some examples. Actually, cultural background plays also a role on some in case of some topics. For example, this is the joke with highest variation between native and non-native speakers. And it's clear that it's related to the 9/11, and maybe the native speakers think that it's not an appropriate topic for jokes, and they rated it lower. But for non-native speakers, maybe it's not that important, and they rated it higher. Another interesting observation that this is the joke with the highest variation in male and female assessors, in male and female participants. And maybe some topics are gender specific to some extent. And we cite a paper on author profiling in social media. And the paper says that sweets and chocolate in particular are more, can be a signal for text written by women. So maybe this is the case when chocolate, it's this joke about chocolate was rated higher by women than by men. And another observation we have, this is the jokes from Jester dataset. And you can see that, first of all, volunteers are more enthusiastic about this joke, this wild, in most cases. And the mTurk workers are less enthusiastic on average. But if we compare with original Jester scores, you can see that most users participated in Jester experiment rated this joke very high. Our hypothesis is that was that this joke sounds a bit outdated in the sounded a bit outdated in 2017 when we conducted the experiments, and because you recall that the data set stems from the late 90s, and it's no surprise, not a new joke. Probably most of the participants heard the joke before, so it's not that fun. Again, this suggests that you cannot easily reuse your joke ratings, and you have to run joke evaluation again anew when the settings changes, or time you have a new situation, and for example you just your joke ratings just expire. So, and maybe the one more interesting observation in context of our meetup here, we had 10 pages, each page with 3 jokes, and we measured how long volunteers and Turkers spent on each page. And you can say that crowd workers are more consistent. The variation is lower, and they work faster. Maybe because they are on average have better language proficiency. Maybe not, but we also try to explain this inconsistency. But we think that, again, volunteers, we asked some of the volunteers who we knew personally, and they said that we are quite tired at the end of the experiments on the page 10, but they were very enthusiastic in the very beginning. Maybe Turkers are more professional. They have this. They don't have this. They are most work more steadily and more consistently. Maybe that's why we don't we see this strange difference on this first page. So, but on average, we can see that Turkers are more efficient, faster. And here are the mean score on each page. And you can see that with only this exception, volunteers are more enthusiastic about jokes, and the average score is a bit higher in all cases but one. So the conclusion of our experiments: crowdsourcing is available options for humor evaluation, and some demographic features can explain the variations in joke ratings. But at the same time, jokes degrade over time, and so do joke ratings. So you have to rerun experiment. You probably won't be able to reuse evaluation results in this domain. Okay, thank you for your attention. If you have questions, I will be happy to answer.
Just one more comment. If you have any questions, please tell your name first and then question second. Because, for instance, I have a lot of questions, and before I start asking them, I would like other people to do so.
Dima, maybe you can start, and maybe people hesitate to ask questions before you.
Yeah, so I was about to change my background to some humor TV show, but I decided not to do so. Well, my question is, in the middle of your presentation, you mentioned the humor generation or something like automatic generation of humor. And what was that?
Okay, in our case, it was quite simple. Maybe actually we generated a response, not the sentence itself. We had a very quite a large collection of presumably funny tweets, and imagine we have we thought about humor response generation in dialogue, in the context of a dialogue. The human issues stimulus, for example. In case of Siri, Siri, are you a robot? And the task of the system is to respond with a funny utterance. And our experiment was, okay, we cannot generate a response from scratch. Let's just pick up a presumably funny and suitable sentence from a collection. And we took these questions from Yahoo Answers and tried to find a more suitable response using very simple information retrieval models. Here are some examples. These are questions from Yahoo Answers asked by presumably by real humans. And these are responses from our tweet collection. And you can see the first one is most people find it funny. It got 3 points by 3 assessors, 3 evaluators, and it's really a good good response. But in case, for example, this one is quite not that great, because it only has, as I said, it's information retrieval model. It has pass and pass here and nothing more in common. So it's not a generation from scratch. It's just information-driven approach to this. But there are several papers published recently on humor generation, for example, pun generation from scratch. It was a paper, Fun Generation with the Press, at last year, NACLA, I guess, by Hehe and Percy Liang from Stanford. But now I think it will be more and more papers on this topic.
When I was looking at these jokes, I think the judgments on whether it's funny or not might be affected by the novelty of these jokes. And have you discussed this before, or?
Yes, it's a very good point. Again, our hypothesis in case of why Siri jokes, I think they are quite funny, but they received quite a low score, and we think it's because of they are, so there is, in humor research there are a distinction between canned jokes, like canned jokes that are known as so it's more professional jokes, or they are like anecdote in Russia, the old jokes in Russia, in Russian. And there are spontaneous jokes that are creative, but maybe not well known and so on. And I think the reason why these Siri jokes got a low score is because they are well known by the participants. And as I showed in case of jester jokes, maybe it's again the problem with the outdated joke, with an old joke, and it's as I said in the conclusion, so the jokes expire and joke ratings expire too.
And have you tried to find some applications to these evaluations?
To these what?
So you have gathered some data, some judgments, some human judgments about funny jokes, and can you just try using these for evaluating conversational systems or information?
No, the idea was to lay the I don't so just again we got evaluations for only 30 jokes. It's a tiny amount. We wanted to explore, we wanted to hire more, to attract more participants, and to see if we can explain the variations of joke ratings through their characteristics. For example, in case of Big Five, we failed to explain these variations through these personality traits. Even though the literature suggested the opposite. But in our case, we didn't succeed. So the whole idea of the study was not to collect and reuse joke scores, joke evaluation, but to explore the very process. If we can apply, if we can use crowdsourcing to evaluate jokes, and how, for example, crowd workers differ from volunteers, who presumably don't cheat and don't spam ratings, don't spam evaluation. And the conclusion is the crowd workers are reliable, even in this subjective task, and they are faster than and more more how to say more
Robust.
consistent in their ratings compared to volunteers. And as I said, the maybe most important conclusion is that we can partially explain the variance in ratings in this course by the demographics of the judges, by age, language proficiency, and in case of some topics, by gender, for example, as in case of with chocolate joke.
I have a small question, if you let me, Dima,
Sure.
Pavel. Hi, my name is Daria, and I'm a project manager at Toloka. Pavel, thank you very much for your great
Thank you for
talk.
inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyways, I just really cannot help myself but ask you, why did you choose the platforms you were working with for this kind of task, and why haven't you used Toloka, for example?
Okay. Uh, it's product placement, right?
No, it's not. It's not. Well, I was actually
Okay,
very scared that you'd say it's product
2000.
placement, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
It was 2017. Please tell me if Taloka was already operational
I
in
think so,
2000.
but I don't think it was like as developed as it's now. So
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah.
And the second problem, I think, even if it was in 2000, so we worked with English, and I doubt that in 2017 there were enough English-speaking workers on Taloka. It was only because we wanted to work on English, and we thought it's easier to find enough workers with English as native speakers in an mechanical Turk. But now, as I know, there are enough English-speaking workers on Talaka, even for those subjective tasks.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering my question.
More questions? Because I have the infinite number of questions.
I have one question. Sorry. My name is Olga. Hi, and thanks, Pavel, for a very interesting speech. I might have missed it at the beginning because I joined a little bit early later. My question was, you mentioned that there are questions with like ability to reproduce the experiment because the jokes get outdated. But my question is, did you try to evaluate, like in the same time, the same jokes by several like batches of Turker workers to see that they are consistent with each other?
No, so you mean self-agreement? The same jerk was presented to the same
No,
work.
I mean that maybe you had not like one group of Turkers, but like two randomly chosen group of Turkers, and they show the same like rankings or something like that.
I didn't get the question. We had more than 100 Turkers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay, so they are all like consistent in
so I think there are some outliers, but on average, they're quite consistent. So I mean,
And did you somehow segment them by region?
by what?
By region from
No,
where?
no. We can segment. I don't remember all the details. Maybe we asked for. Maybe we hired only Turkers from English speaking language from English speaking countries.
Mm-hmm.
Not guaranteed that they are native speakers, but I think we introduced this restriction that they must be either from the US, the UK, or maybe Canada. I don't remember, but I think we introduced some. So we wanted more native speakers, and I think we tried to do it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
But because we knew that we could find volunteers likely from our neighborhood, and we wanted to get somewhere native speakers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And when you were designing a task on Mechanical Turk, have you provided the participants with some gold questions and gold labels?
No, as I said, we thought we cannot introduce some bias by providing. So this is a problem, as I said, without some gold ground truth labels. We cannot control Turkers. We cannot say this is a good one. This one is a spammer, but we didn't want to introduce this bias and say it's funny. You have to. This was the intention. That's why we had quite a lot Turkers for this rather small number of jokes.
And when you are talking about consistency, which measure do you use?
No, I mean, when I was talking about consistency, I was talking about the pace, how they worked, because you can see that they are more consistent than volunteers. And we talked to some volunteers because some of them were our friends, and they said they were quite tired at the end of the experiment. And you can see that they, on average, they spent about half a minute on a page. Here's the seconds. So I think, I can't remember, but I think the variance is also lower in case of Turkers. Variance of scores.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Maybe more questions?
Just a side remark. I don't know, maybe Pavel, you're familiar with that or not. Alisa is evaluating jokes in some quite similar way for their production of jokes. But they have some human-powered production of jokes, which are written by copywriters, and then they are evaluated by the crowd in order to rank them objectively and filter out those jokes which are most probably not funny.
This is interesting because I thought if jokes are written by an editor, you can expect a certain level of quality, and it must.
But then it's a question. Like, we didn't want to fall in the problem you described in the beginning with the Siri, where they have very limited number of jokes and they get repeated very soon. So that means that you need to have a lot of editors, and that means that, of course, there wouldn't be thousands of them, but even you have I don't know, dozens of them, you need to somehow control their quality. And that's
interesting because I thought it's this setting is more when you want to quasi-generate or from a larger pool of possible jokes.
Well, it actually it can be applied in more ways. Maybe later we will, yes, the editors will be replaced with some GPT-3 model, and it will be evaluated in the same way.
Again, for a production level system, I think it's if the jokes are not hopeless, you can try to measure the reactions somehow. For example, record the laughter and see if.
Yeah, but that turns to be more difficult than evaluate them in Taloka, for example.
No, I think you can make A/B testing. I understand that as you are Taloka proponent, so you have, but I think it's also possible if, for example, for development stage, I think it's crucial to evaluate on a crowdsourcing.
It's actually interesting. Sorry, it's actually the main the idea that I'm trying to share is that for many applications, actually, the use of the crowdsourcing may be effective and at the same time much easier and cheaper in implementation rather than like difficult. Of course, everything can be solved in different ways, and you can use A/B testing or record laughter or whatever. But in really many cases, you can find a simpler solution when you have some tools to use it.
But from I would say from research point of view, I think it's, if you have an opportunity to evaluate it in the wild, I would go to evaluate it in the wild, because it's.
Didn't your study just show that it's like it's the same, or here there is no like comparison with I don't know, real life evaluation of those?
No, there is no comparison with the real life evaluation. But so in our previous study, when we tried to, it was it was very small scale, but we posted the response of the model to Yahoo Answers and just waited a while if it collects some stars or. And it's interesting, in some cases it was even chosen as a best answer by the asker, but it's interesting. But I think it's very platform dependent, because Yahoo Answers, it's somehow in particular this jokes and riddles category is quite strange. Some jokes are quite bizarre, and maybe it's,
yeah, that's also disputable to call it like more, to call it like evaluation in the wild, because such services are really also biased somewhere.
But I think, in our case, we wanted to evaluate some random so we had like 300,000 tweets, and the model picks one at the response, and we didn't have control over this. And I wouldn't in this scenario, I wouldn't evaluate it in the wild, but in case of manually crafted jokes, I would say let's evaluate it on the real users. It will be at least funny.
Okay, that can be a topic of your future research.
Okay, now we are as you can see from the second slide, I guess everybody's somewhere else, not in academia. No, in academia, but somewhere far away. So it's now the project is closed, and I'm trying to do something in humor, computational humor, but this team is also finished this project.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers.
But I would be less pessimistic. Maybe you should instead say, like, look how high those people climbed after these studies.
Okay. I think they will climb even higher in a couple of years.
Pavel, hello. I have one question. So did I understand correctly that in Mechanical Turk you paid money for workers? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But in volunteers, did you pay them?
No. Volunteers, we attracted them through social media, and they had the very same interface. They could just perform it online and.
Okay, and in the first case, you have a money motivated group, and the second, you haven't not motivated money group. Could this affect? Could this affect the research results? Or
yes. So our the question was the problem with the paid workers in some cases is that they cheat or they spam results. And as I said, we didn't have ground truth labels for this data, and we were not sure. And we wanted to compare volunteers who presumably don't spam results and paid workers. They are paid, they are making money, but maybe in some cases are not that are not very the quality is not very high. But we found out that Turkers paid workers are more consistent and faster, and the results are quite close to what we get from volunteers. So
okay, thank you.
The outcome is, I think, it's reliable even for this subjective task.
Okay, any more questions?
I have a question. Thank you, Pavel, for your talk and for your paper. My name is Sophia. I'm a graduate student at the Technical University of Munich. And for the past year, I did a natural language processing fellowship at Stanford, where I work on extremist speech. So not that funny. Well, my whole project was like your 9/11 joke. So in my work, which was counterintuitive, I've seen that I was dissecting these behavioral biases from data longer hours than I was improving my technical methods. So I think that automating or evening out mixed data and just trying to make data show even results was harder than any of the deep learning methods that I was using. So have you found any way to automate that, or do you think that there might be possibly special people on your team who are trained in, for example, anthropology to be able to, explain outliers and just maybe explain some behavioral tendencies in your data?
If I understood your question correctly, we are not anthropologists or psychologists.
Yeah, sure.
But we try to understand to explain some outliers, as I showed in one of the slides. For example, this 9/11 joke that was the highest variation between native and non-speakers, or for example, chocolate jokes. But if you are asking about automating, making this humor evaluation automatic, I think there are. I think it's possible. There are, especially if you restrict the domain or restrict the situation, because there are some. There are several papers on humor detection. They work quite well on restricted, specially prepared data sets. I doubt that they will work equally well in the wild, because what I can see in these models, they are very sensitive and they actually not learn humor, that learn some language patterns that can be not humor specific, for example, unexpected words or metaphors like figurative language and so on. They're not that specific for now, and they are quite shallow. But I think you can apply it for humor detection. It's okay, but in our case, so these are two parts of the problem: humor detection and humor generation.
Exactly.
We try to evaluate humor generation, and theoretically, it's possible to apply humor detector to humor generation, and there are also even a paper, Pan gun, using adversarial networks to produce humor, because if you have a detector, you can generate train a network. But I think, as in other application, you cannot avoid at some point you cannot get rid of human evaluation, especially in dialogue, in case of dialogues, because the space, the dimensionality grows so rapidly, because in case every time you have more and more variants, more and more options, if you count from the very start of the dialogue. And I think it's hard to evaluate fully automatically. But so if you can define the task well and restrict it, maybe it's okay. But I would, as if it's a production system, I would still warrant a place where I can evaluate the system using humans,
Right.
either users or Turkers, crowdsource workers.
Right, got it. Fascinating, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have more questions? Maybe someone else? I hear no questions anymore. So I think I'm really grateful to the speaker. I enjoyed the talk. I enjoyed the discussion. Thank you very much. The next instance of our seminar will be December 3rd, 2020. We will post updates on the Meetup website, so please follow it and subscribe. And I hope we will find another one amazing speaker like Pavel. Thank you very much today.
Thank you very much for having me. By the way, I can share my presentation if somebody is interested. I'll send my presentation to the organizers.
Yeah, it would be great to receive it. And my last question may be, if you want to invite some researchers or some people to collaborate with your further studies, you can just say if you want this. Maybe some people will hear your call.
Okay, if somebody is interested in topic related to humor detection, and you can just drop me a line. The address was on the last. Oops. Okay, it's I stopped the presentation, but you can easily Google my email.
Thank you very much. I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.